Welcome, Fright Night Vault listeners. Some stories feel wrong to speak aloud. They carry a weight, an odor, the temperature of a closed room. But tonight, I will open one such room for you. It begins in the sweltering August heat, in a city of brick lecture halls, creaking apartments, and the restless churn of students chasing futures. A college town in the American South, where the days burned bright and the nights hummed with cicadas, and no one suspected the shadow that had already arrived. He was a drifter, nameless to the people he passed, faceless to the city that unknowingly welcomed him. He carried almost nothing, except for a knife, long and sharp, and an urge so deep it had eaten away everything else inside him. For days, he watched. From the shadow of live oaks, from the alleys behind off-campus apartments, from the dark edges of parking lots. He studied windows, he memorized doors, and when he moved, it was with the patience of a hunter who knew his prey was still learning that it was prey at all. The first victim's apartment was small, second floor, tucked in the kind of complex where neighbors nodded but didn't linger. She was alone that night. The heat clung to her walls, so the windows were cracked just enough to coax a breeze. Somewhere past midnight, the screen shifted, silent to her, but deliberate to him. A gloved hand, the whisper of metal on metal. The lock gave way without a cry. He stepped inside. What happened next would never be truly known by anyone but him. But the scene left behind told the story in its own cruel way. The attack was swift, violent, the kind meant to overwhelm before a scream could take shape. And when it was done, he lingered. He moved her body, arranged it. As if the act itself wasn't enough, he needed to leave a mark beyond the wound. By morning, the sun rose on a town still blissfully unaware. It would take hours before the police arrived, and by then, he was already gone. Watching again. The next night, he struck again. Another apartment, another young woman asleep alone. This time he came through the back, testing the door before pressing the blade against the thin seam. The lock broke. The door sighed open. The attack was frenzied yet calculated. He moved with purpose, as if he'd rehearsed every motion in a place only he could see. Again, when it was over, he staged the scene, a macabre signature, and again he vanished into the night without being seen. 2 nights, 2 murders. The local police were already stretched thin. But whispers began to coil through the city, students warning each other in hurried tones, parents calling their children, deadbolts selling out in hardware stores. Still, no one knew the face of the shadow. On the 3rd night, he chose differently. An apartment with 2 women, friends, studying, sharing rent to keep costs low. They'd stayed up later than usual, the blue light of the TV flickering across their faces. One fell asleep on the couch. The other drifted off in her bed, the television still murmuring in the background. He slipped in anyway. The first kill was quiet, the knife moving like a whisper through the dark. The second was messier, the roommate waking to the sound of movement, confusion turning to terror in the space of a single breath. By the time her scream reached the air, it was cut short. The police knew by then that they were hunting a single man. The wounds, the staging, the method of entry, all pointed to one set of hands. But the city was too large, the fear too fresh, and the killer too careful. He left Gainesville briefly, only to return. When he did, he broke into another small apartment. This time, the victim was a young man. It didn't matter. The attack was as ruthless as the rest, ending quickly. And in the moments afterward, the staging returned, not as elaborate, but present. By now, the streets were hollow at night. Students slept in groups, doors double-locked, windows nailed shut. Still, he managed to slip inside one final home, a ground-floor unit, a young woman alone. He came through the sliding glass door, crossing the room in seconds. The struggle was short-lived, but in its violence, it left the apartment in ruins. When the sun rose, the crime scene was another echo of his grim ritual. In 5 days, he had killed 5 people. 5 young lives, ended before the city could even adjust to the idea that they were in danger. And then, he was gone. The investigation that followed reached into every corner of the city. Tips poured in, false leads draining time, but the man they wanted had already left. He traveled north, committed other crimes. It wasn't until a later arrest, for something entirely different, that the threads began to pull tight. DNA matched, evidence aligned. The quiet drifter had a name, Danny Rolling. His capture ended the killing, but not the fear. In court, he confessed to all 5 Gainesville murders. He spoke of them without remorse, detailing his movements, confirming what the police had suspected, that he had watched each victim for hours before breaking in, that he chose his targets for opportunity. The unlocked window, the ground floor door, the light that went out earlier than the night before. Rolling was sentenced to death. But the story he carved into Gainesville's history never faded. Even after his execution, the details lived on, whispered in dorm rooms, repeated by parents to nervous children. Because it wasn't just the violence. It was the way he moved, the way he lingered, the way he wanted to be remembered. The story you just heard is no invention. The incident is called the Gainesville Ripper, which inspired the movie Scream. Be careful with the shadows at the end of your street. Some of them have learned how to wait. If you made it this far, you're one of us. Subscribe so you don't miss what crawls out next. And if you have a horror story of your own, leave it in the comments. The Vault listens. The next story could be yours. See you on the next one.